Hey everybody, it's Lisa from Been There, Got Out, and we are thrilled to have Officer Jackson have offered to do this question and answer session because I knew it would be a really tough crowd. So thank you, Officer Jackson, for agreeing to try to tackle some of these huge issues by yourself. But let's see what you have to say. All right, ready?
Yes, I'm ready.
First question. Okay, so domestic violence victims face a lot of biases and obstacles, and one of the most pervasive is not being believed. So I'm just going to read you a couple of anecdotes from the responses I got when I put it out there that people would be able to voice their questions as well as opinions to police officers. So the first said, even with proof and pictures, they still doubt us. And the second is a bit longer. So I'll ask you to just comment on this after. 2 years ago, my children had to repeatedly call the police on their dad. Police showed up and told them their dad had every right to, quote, whoop their ass, and wrote up in a police report that the very blatant fingernail scratches on them were made from our cats. The officers asked the kids if they had animals at home and said that's where they were from, even though our cats have been declawed for 5 years now. I raised the issue with their superior, and he was arrogant and said none of his, quote, men would lie in a police report. 2 weeks later, in a different county, he attacked the kids in a public kids camp. The camp went on lockdown, police were called, restraining order, no trespassing order. Some are good cops and some are bad cops. The cops on the second incident were dumbfounded as my kids still had bruises from the incident 2 weeks prior. Police internally need to be held accountable. What do you have to say?
Wow. I would definitely err on the I guess the second time the police were called. I can't even imagine going through something like that. An option always is it's familiar in the jurisdiction in which I work. If you don't feel you can go to the police or the police never particularly doing anything, you can always go to a court commissioner's office in your jurisdiction. And based off of the court commissioner will always give you paperwork to where you can write up charges of your own toward someone that had committed some sort of offense. And then the court commissioner themselves will read it and judge whether it's warranted, whether charges can be brought against an offender.
Okay, so the court commissioner, it's not anything that someone would do against the police who didn't handle the matter properly, but that's what they would do against the abuser. So instead of just the police, this is another option that they could have.
Yes, that's one other option. Now, if you have any issues toward police themselves, each police department has an internal affairs division, and I think if you go to any precinct and ask specifically for that information, probably without going into specifics of who particularly you're talking about, which would probably be like the wise thing to do, you would get that information from a police precinct as far as getting that sort of information.
Okay, so back to the court commissioner's office, where, like, I'm thinking I wouldn't know where to look. Where do I find a court commissioner's office? Is that in court? Is that in the police department? Is it a separate building?
Literally, you can Google it. You can look up on Google Maps and put commissioners, court commissioner's office, and it shows up where I'm at, and you could probably Google it or GPS it. There's several ways to find these things.
Okay, great. Is it a county?
It's out there if you look for it.
All right, is it county, city, state, like?
I think anywhere.
Okay.
Really, if they have a website, you can find them.
Good.
Just gotta look.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Next question. Another common theme for our community is this. This is a big one. Why do so many police officers seem to side with and sympathize with the perpetrator of domestic violence?
That's something I can't particularly speak on, but I mean, look, I've gone to incidents where one person one person in particular is calling on the police. This particular incident was a female calling the police. And then when we get there, the man is, I mean, sorry to be so graphic, but he's sliced up like Swiss cheese. So, and she's not. So one with in my particular area in Maryland, there is a requirement that we have to make a judgment call here. Okay. All right, one thing is who called. Okay. That's one thing. But we also look at who's the most injured person out of all the people. And in this particular situation, the guy, he was sliced and diced. Like he wasn't looking very good at all. And you have to make a judgment call in this case. And we have to base it off of evidence that's there. And there's situations where a definitive action needs to take place, especially with domestic violence, because if you walk away from it and it turns into something worse than what it was when we were there, then that can start turning back on our responsibility of what we did or we didn't do. So in my particular area, they prefer somebody has to go. Somebody has to go. Because it's been known all across this country, if you walk away from a situation not wanting to make an actionable call, then if something happens to that person or one of the people in that situation, then more often than not, they're going to be looking at us at what we did or we did not do. Mm-hmm. And if we can't definitively or at least reasonably say, we're looking for the primary aggressor. When we come to a situation, we're looking for the primary aggressor, regardless of who called. And just like that first example I just made, the woman called, but the guy looks like he went through a meat cleaver. So it's really it's a judgment call, and someone has to go in this case.
Yeah. So when you say someone has to go, I'm thinking certain states, an officer has to arrest one person. Is that what you mean?
In certain states, I wouldn't say states. I would say in certain cities or jurisdictions, counties, the policy is someone has to go. It's not a law, because there's a lot of confusion nowadays with departmental policies and then laws on the book. So the policies of departments or counties are pretty much CYA, cover your own. So later on, the city doesn't have to take care of certain things that the law doesn't provide clear answers on.
Mm-hmm. I was going to say, I know in our town, domestic violence is the second top crime. How is it where you are? How common?
It happens all the time. In my particular area, things happen all the time, always. So, it's really just running from one place to another place to another place to another place. So, and there's not enough officers.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Now, this is another one that came up all the time. I hope it doesn't make you cringe, but what if a police officer is the abuser?
Simply, I would find a way to obtain some sort of evidence that that is factual. But number one, go to internal affairs. Um, that's ideally what they are for. And if you make a complaint about a particular officer, a certain situation, and come with specifics, don't be broad. Come with specifics. If this is the truth, then speak your truth and let the evidence show for it. If you have no evidence, don't expect a great outcome. You must have evidence.
Yeah, I mean, we tell everybody all the time with court and with the document.
Absolutely.
Yeah, because that seems to be a big thing. You know, domestic violence rates are really high among police officers, and then a lot of victims are afraid to report because I feel like, you know, often it's a man and he's got all these friends and he's going to be protected, and then they're going to come after the person. And speaking of that, a woman had said that her ex-husband worked in law enforcement and made false accusations against her, and then the police arrested her, and she wanted to know if she had any recourse against the police for his false allegations.
Well, it kind of depends on what the allegations were and what evidence he had to back up those allegations.
Okay.
And you have to handle those things kind of like a case by case type basis. Well, it also depends on what was alleged. If you're saying there was an assault, then I would say 99.9% of the time there needs to be some sort of physical evidence of assault. So that's about as far as I can go with that. It's really based off of evidence, not just hearsay.
Okay, so again, it's all documentation. So same thing we tell everybody with court, you document everything.
Documentation. More often, and I just want to just like stop on this one point. People make accusations all the time. It's factual. Even you're working with the police or not, if you're involved with police, if it's against a police officer or just like civilians, just people on the street, they feel a sort of way. Sometimes people feel vindictive and they want to get someone, you know, caught up or locked up or, you know, just ruin their life in some way, shape, or form. People have said literally anything and everything to try to make somebody's life hell. That's facts. That's facts. So this is where you must have evidence, physical evidence, something tangible, paperwork, something. If you're alleging fraud, bank statements, evidence. That's evidence. Anything physical assault. Take a picture of the physical evidence of assault. But when it happens, you don't wait a week. You don't wait 2 days, 3 days, 4 days, 5 days, next month, next year. No. When it happens, at that moment, within a couple hours, that's when something needs to be done about it.
It makes me think of like a car accident.
Exactly.
Don't like
come
right
back.
then, nobody goes anywhere.
Right. Oh, you get in a car accident. Don't call 911 6 months later and say, I got in a car accident. What am I supposed to do about that? My car's messed up. What am I supposed to do about that? Like you waited 6 months. I mean, I can understand that, you know what? It may have been a traumatic experience or you didn't want to get someone in trouble. I get that. But waiting a week, 2 weeks, 3, 4, 5 months, 6 months, just before the end of a year, my head is saying, because we're talking to a police officer, something's not right.
Mm-hmm.
You're giving me, you want to report something that I can't investigate.
Good point.
And when I'm writing a report, I'm only writing down, I can write down a statement that the complainant's making, but I'm also going to add in the amount of time, when it happened, when it was reported. So if it's 6 months later, we're kind of wondering what was the holdup? What's making you not? Because we put it in our own perspective.
Mm-hmm.
If I got in a car accident and I injured my back, wouldn't you go to the hospital that day? When I drive to the other side of the city and then report it. Happens all the time.
Yeah. Wow.
Why would you do that? It doesn't make any sense.
I love the part how you really, sorry, I love how you also noted about the accusations, that maybe we don't realize that you're getting accusations all the time. So you can't just believe every single time someone calls with a complaint.
Yeah, no. I've had coworkers that got complaints from citizens, and turns out they were actually on vacation out of the country. And you wonder, what were they talking about?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So we have to be critical of what everyone says. We have to put it through some level of a vetting process. That's why when we're arriving and we're sitting down, we're understanding what's going on, and we're going to start asking questions. We're not there just to take reports. We're testing the legitimacy of the accusation.
All right. So I think that's hard for some people to accept, but I know you're speaking from your own perspective. Other people don't do it the same way, and we'll get a little more into that. Okay, so you ready for the next question?
Yes.
All right. So someone also in our community recently had an issue with wanting a parent, like an exchange with the child, a very young child, to take place at a police station, because she wanted to ensure that whatever happened was not only caught on camera, but also if something went wrong, she could immediately just walk right in and get assistance. So this didn't happen. They weren't able to agree on this, but I suggested that before this even took place, that maybe she should call the police, and there might be another way to handle it other than physically right in front of the police station. So what would you recommend in this kind of situation when there's been safety issues in the past? Like, do police offer any kind of assistance in circumstances like this, like accompanying a parent at drop-off? And the reason I'm asking too is I'm thinking with safety planning, often when someone leaves, this is what another friend of mine who's a police officer said, he said you can call a police officer to be present, to make sure you're able to get out. So I'm wondering, is that applicable to this kind of thing also?
Absolutely.
Really?
Absolutely. It happens all the time. If they're not willing to meet at a police station to do a drop off, which is it's common for that to happen. They can do drop offs in front of the station. They can do it in front inside the station. Even with COVID now, I mean, things are opening up. But I've had that at people's house. Some people have protective orders and peace orders against the other person, and they're just coming to get the child, and that's it. Not say a word to each other. It's like, can you meet me here so I can get my child? Absolutely, it's not a problem at all. We go there. We sit there for a couple minutes, because obviously can't wait an hour, 30 minutes or anything like that. But a reasonable amount of time, 10, 15 minutes most. They do a quick exchange. Sometimes they have words back and forth, but hey, the child was transferred to the other parent. One parent goes the other way, the other parent goes the other way. That's the end.
Oh, that's really good to know. I hope people pay attention to that. Okay. And then in the same thread, this has been something, what happens when a child won't go for to the other parent for a court ordered visitation? Like, can you actually, like, how involved do you get? Do you have to physically make a child go with the other parent if they're kicking and screaming and crying, or does it depend on the age? Like, how do you handle that when someone calls the police because their kid won't get into the car with the other parent?
Personally, I would say personally on this particular question, I don't know of any officer or myself who have ever physically assisted a child to the other parent. Uh, we might go to a location and talk to them and try to figure out why the child doesn't want to go. But outside of that, we aren't physically taking a child and bringing a child to the other parent. I would never do that. And I don't think any rational police officer would do that either.
Mm-hmm. So what do you do if the kid makes clear that they're being abused in some way by the other parent? Like, do you do a report that could maybe used for something later in court?
Doesn't need to follow up on that. Well, if that's the case, just like I said before, we would kind of delve a little deeper into what the allegation actually is, because sometimes it's just miscommunication, or sometimes it's the child parroting or mimicking what the other parent says, and they don't quite understand the context of the words that they're using. So we want to make it clear what is actually being said, and then if it is what it seems like it is, then a follow-up report on that particular incident needs to be admitted.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Good. All right. And now getting into more of the order stuff. So one person we know says, why is it hard for you guys to file a police report for violation of a final restraining order? So her ex repeatedly violates the restraining order. She says she submitted evidence to the police and gets told that there's nothing they can do about it, or it's not their jurisdiction. So how can police reports and protective orders be worded in a way that shows exactly what's going on and can be enforceable? I already in my head, I'm like, you don't have control over a judge, but what do you think?
Okay. So if the final protection order is already in place and that person is violating it, evidence, evidence, evidence. If he's there out in front of your house or talking to you where he's not supposed to be at, take a picture. Next part, call 911. Because in every picture, there's going to be a date. It was a picture of it. It'll have a date when the picture was taken. It'll have a time when the picture was taken. And then if you call immediately, as you should, because why wait? You should not wait ever. Can I just make a big point? Do not wait. Don't wait a day, 2 days, a month. Now. Okay. But it lends to credibility, because if you call when that person violates the protective order, we'll see what time you called. We'll see what time the officer arrived. We'll see what time he took the picture. And that all should happen on the same date. You are extremely credible in this moment. You are very believable.
That's great. So timing, documentation.
Game, set, and match.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. So then charges can be brought against this person.
Mm-hmm. All right. So I guess that's the most you can do. And then whatever the judge decides in terms of consequences.
Absolutely. And another thing, if this with all this information, because you didn't wait, right date, right time, if he's still on scene, which he more likely than not will not be, but if for any reason and stranger things have happened, and it'll be like a block away or 2 blocks away, and I get a picture of him. He's arrested. And if he's not there, we're going to go get a warrant on him because he's violating a protective order at that point. That's literally in policy.
All right. We'll tell her. All right. Next, so another person had a big problem with police regarding children being present during an altercation. And she said, quote, "It would be basic to never question the children in front of the parents, especially the one being accused of abuse. Children honestly want to love both parents, even the terrible ones. And it takes a lot of courage for a child to say, the person I want to love hurts me and lies." So in terms of, again, domestic altercation, is there a reason that police shouldn't separate the kids when there's an abusive encounter, when they're right there?
Right. When you say kids, I assume that they're minors. I mean,
yes,
they're
minors.
above 18, and they're always your kid, regardless of how old they are. But excuse me. So in these cases, in my particular area, they have detectives that do kind of like family crimes. So in this particular situation, we would defer to them as far as like interviewing. But I would say this as an officer, a minor child in this case that you feel needs to be questioned, I would ask for permission to question first, because they are a minor child, and a parent has a right to be in the same room questioning a minor child. But I can see where it can get a little convoluted if like the suspect of the abuse is sitting there while you're interviewing the child. So I would ask for permission there. And then if permission isn't granted, then I would refer to family crimes, the detectives, so they can come out and they could question the child. And in that case, and if the non-suspect parent I would allow them to be in the same room, but not in any way kind of, I guess, coerce the child into parroting what the parent had already said. So, I mean, I wouldn't mind them being close, maybe even being on the other side of the door, but I would want to like get the full, with permission from the parents. I want to hone in on that. With permission from the parents, the questioning can happen.
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense. All right. Another thing, back to the whole jurisdiction issue. So someone said, "I've seen amazing and kind and honorable young policemen in California, and unfortunately, they weren't in the perp's jurisdiction, but my jurisdiction. What if you find a great cop that's outside of your jurisdiction? Is there anything that can be done to get them to help you in your own area?"
I would not. No. It needs to be done in your jurisdiction.
Mm-hmm. All right.
I can't, if I'm in, and I'm I can't go into another officer's jurisdiction and then try to apply charges to, a foreign place. If it says I'm a DC police officer, then all my incidents happen in DC. That is my jurisdiction. I'm familiar with their laws. That is what it is.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
Yes. Yes. Unless you're federal. And then in that case, well, that's different.
Yeah. All right. I'm looking at my questions, and I think I had already asked one in another way before, so I'm going to jump ahead a little bit. Somebody was asking about she wanted the police to offer. I know you guys probably don't go around offering to do drive-bys, but she's saying that she's concerned often there's an unwanted vehicle and she wanted the police to do a drive-by, and she asked for it several times because it gave her such a sense of peace, but some of the officers refused to do it. Somebody said, or she said that some of the officers said they couldn't help because his name was on the mortgage. So I'm thinking, okay, so say it's my house, my ex is on the mortgage, he doesn't live here anymore, and he's stalking. And I call the police and say, could you just do a drive-by? You guys wouldn't be able to do it if my ex's name is on the mortgage, but how would you know his name's on the mortgage?
There's ways. There's like I guess you can look online and find like what do you call it? Real property search, and you can find like owners or semi-updated owners of like properties or previous owners of properties. So it's like it's open to everyone. It's not something just police only. When she says drive by, does she mean like knocking on the door to check on the well-being of someone?
She didn't
I think that's what she meant.
Mm-hmm.
I can't see the effectiveness of driving by a house and not stopping at. I can't see where that would do anything. So I think she's actually talking about like knocking on the door and checking. I think, well, it depends on who's asking to do a drive-by, because sometimes your abuser, the suspect, because his name is on the mortgage, says he wants to do a check the well-being at this address to see if that person's there.
Oh, wow. That's really interesting.
And then we are the pawns. They have to call this person back, say, oh yeah, he's there. Oh, and she's fine.
Wow.
Yeah.
I did not expect that. That's
People
a good one. Wow.
Oh yeah.
Interesting.
Yes.
All right. So you're doing great so far without.
Thank you.
This is going to be a lot harder. All right. Now I have a bunch of comments I'm going to read to you. This is my last like official question issue, because we had a really engaged discussion on this topic. And so I'll do it in blocks and just say what are your comments or opinions. So somebody said, we need more officers who understand that a person can be totally different to them and in public, but a complete monster behind closed doors. How do you understand that?
I think we already understand. People tend to put their best person forward. Shout out to the narcissists out there. But yes, people always put their I guess their best image forward, and then can be something completely different once the eyes aren't on them anymore. So I'm sure quite a few officers understand that, but people need to understand evidence. We can't make action on something that might be going on. There's a level of where we're going past our scope of duty with intrusion, trying to find something that is kind of like out of our scope or responsibility.
Yeah.
And we don't want to leave ourselves open to litigation by doing something like that.
Okay, that makes sense. All right. So another person said it would help if you asked women reporting abuse or assault, etc., if they would like to be interviewed by a female officer, because that might give a bit more reassurance. And like we started at the beginning, the survivor often feels like no one believes them, and reporting to police can make this worse and re-traumatize the person reporting. And she said she thinks it would also help if you made it easier to find out if someone has a history of domestic violence or assault, especially once they've been reported. And then lastly, she thinks it would be hugely beneficial if you had regular refresher training on the signs of abuse and took mental abuse and coercive control more seriously.
Wow, that's a lot.
I know. That's just one of many.
Might have to take it in pieces.
Yeah. Okay. So basically, the female police officer.
Okay.
What do you think of that?
I love a female police officer. Unfortunately, nowadays, and I'm coming up on 9 years. A lot of female police officers do not stay in the patrol capacity. So if it's literally maybe two on a shift, and some shifts don't have any. So a female officer is hard to come by.
Interesting. Makes me think
more often than not.
Maybe some survivors of domestic violence should consider going into police work.
Possibly.
Yeah.
They could be unbiased.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So also the comment about to find out, like you were able to look up maybe mortgages and things, but are you able to look up if someone has a history of domestic assault and violence once it's been reported? I mean, I'm sure you can, right?
Yes, okay. Absolutely. It can be done. It's okay. So we can't act off of someone's past history.
Okay. Really?
Right. Because it's you're walking in biased.
Okay.
Right. You're not coming in with a clear head. You're thinking, oh, this person's always attacking this person. From my own personal recollection of how many times I've been at a certain house, I know it's going to be trouble. It's a trouble house. Mm-hmm. But walking in already saying, well, in 1995 he had this, and in 1998 he had this, in 2012 he had this, he did that. That's not a regular practice. We have to not base it off of someone's past, but we have to base it off of the evidence that is there. And another thing, if a particular person has a history of physical domestic violence, or I would highly recommend you get out of that situation. I know it's harder. It's harder than to get out of that particular area, but I mean, it's hard. It's hard to get out of certain situations. It is.
Yeah.
But the repetitive calls to the same place for usually the same thing is there's only so far we can take incidents based off of what evidence is there. The other half has to be with the people involved in that incident. Mm-hmm. They have to take the responsibility of that part, because we can't take you out of there.
You can't fix it.
Yeah.
Okay, and then what about this thing about training? Because that's a big deal too. So our police.
Can I pause you 1 second?
Okay.
I'll pause you 1 second.
Yes.
Okay, I'm back.
Okay. All right. So with training, I'm imagining it's different for every police precinct, but do you get training on the signs of abuse, like coercive control? So mental, psychological, financial, legal, revenge porn, etc., digital.
Yes. Some of those. So some things are based on evidence. Some things are we have to take up like an extra level. anything revenge porn or technology related, we have certain detectives that deal with that particular area. Cyber crimes, that would be a unit that would look into online stuff. People posting pictures that the victim wouldn't want it posted and that sort of thing. That would be cybercrime type situations, anything technological. As far as what was the other thing you were talking about?
Emotional, psychological,
Emotional, psychological.
verbal.
Emotional, psychological. Because we have to operate in an environment of evidence. It's hard to see emotional violence.
Yeah.
You can suspect it, but it doesn't rise to any sort of criminal action that we can act on.
So the police aren't the ones to deal directly with the psychological hidden abuse. It's more obvious physical and digital cybercrime stuff, like where you could see something.
Yeah,
I remember,
something you can see.
Yeah, years ago, I had asked a friend of mine, a police officer, what about hidden abuse? And he said, in our state, that's not considered a crime. Like, I can't do anything as a police officer about psychological abuse. Now, I'm in Connecticut, and we just had Jennifer's Law passed, which expands the legal definition of domestic violence to include coercive control. But again, it's one of those things that involves patterns of behavior and evidence that has to be gathered over time. So it isn't something, even to go to court with, say, he'd said this to me. Just like bullying, it's not usually a one-time, it's patterns over time. And so documentation is so important. But it sounds like for that kind of thing, the police aren't the people to go to for the psychological abuse, mental. Yeah.
No, man.
Okay. All right. So moving on to another person's comment. She said, I think it's important for officers and others in position of influence to advocate from within their departments and organizations. I'd like to believe that most people, like judges, police, etc., are really ignorant on the intricacies of domestic violence, and it doesn't always fit into a neat little box. Police and others need training on identifying the different ways in which domestic violence and abuse may show up. So a police officer that has empathy shouldn't be considered the exception to the rule. She's learning more and more that empathy can't be taught, but there is training and advocacy that can happen to understand and recognize the signs. So how can we teach police officers or anybody for more empathy, or with your job in particular, where you're dealing with terrified victims and manipulators? Like, how can someone become more sensitive to that?
It's difficult. It's difficult to be sensitive to particular things. I did want to mention this one part that kind of stuck to me while you were reading. Judges I don't feel are naive to domestic violence in general. There are judges that literally deal with only domestic violence court cases. They are very open to listening. They understand the ins and outs of the domestic violence cases, or just by speaking to both the plaintiffs and the defendants. What happens more often than not, and this may or may not blow your mind, is and this kind of leads back to like levels of like credibility for us, the police officer, is if you make an accusation stating Joey hit me. Joey's not there. He left. Write up the paperwork, get a warrant for arrest on Joey. A couple months later, Joey ends up getting arrested. We go to court. The plaintiff, the person that wrote the paperwork on Joey, doesn't show up. Like 70% of the time.
What?
She knows, can't make this up. She knows that Joey got arrested. She knows when the court case is. The state's attorneys attempt to contact this lady over and over and over again. Some even take the initiative to go to your address and knock on the door.
70%.
It's in my jurisdiction. I can't tell you how many times I've been to domestic violence court and the person that I wrote the paperwork for doesn't even show up.
Oh my gosh.
Joey's there because Joey's in handcuffs.
Wow.
And
what happens? So they just drop
let go that day.
Oh my gosh.
Just to do it all over again.
Uh-huh.
But sometimes, and I've had this happen quite a bit too, not doubting domestic violence victims, but I've literally had, and this is sometimes used as a certain controls, I've actually had victims say this person was assaulted, and I'm like, I got arrested. And I arrest them, and the next day they call back and they're like, I want to recant for such and such a thing. And I'm like, Joey's already in jail.
Mm-hmm.
You can't recant.
Right. So like drop the charges.
You can't drop the charges. You just made an allegation.
Right. Right.
So, I mean, and sometimes people use that as an advantage to be like, well, Joey's in jail, but he's not going to get charged because I'm not going to court. This is just to put Joey in a spot to where he's checked now because he got arrested by the police.
Do you think it actually has that much of an impact at all if someone gets arrested? It's almost like, are they scared, or it depends on the individual?
I'm sorry. Can you?
Okay, so the victim is like, I want to get him arrested to like show him that, you know, the police are watching him and this could happen, but then he's out. They don't go to court. They don't follow through. The person, say Joey, who is arrested, how often is he actually really scared? Like, wow, there's consequences for me, because then again, he's let off. Like, what do you think? I mean, for me, with a lot of stuff, when somebody makes a threat and they don't follow through, however many times it happens, the person who gets in trouble is emboldened because they're like, oh, nothing's going to happen to me.
Or sometimes it might even be traumatized to the point where they're like, I may not actually have to, get really put away, but I'm going to get arrested again.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a weird place to be in.
So it could go either way.
Either way.
Yeah. Interesting. Okay. So another person said, if each department had a dedicated domestic violence officer per shift and per rotation, could you follow up with survivors during the day and have one on scene to support survivors? Again, this is the empathy question. Like, did the police have anything like that? Did they ever check back the next day or have someone almost like a counselor just available?
I think in some jurisdictions where the call volume isn't so high, some jurisdictions do have people that follow up with the domestic violence type situations. I know in mine, we do have, actually we don't have one because it happens so often and our call volume is off the charts. And in this situation, in this particular role, I would assume the person asking this question would like a female officer to come and do these follow-ups. And there aren't that many female officers nowadays in a patrol capacity, or not even in a patrol capacity, but I feel like over the last years, with the law enforcement profession kind of taking a downturn for several reasons. Less people in general are going toward law enforcement, but even less so female officers. So it's a staffing issue.
Wow. Okay, I know our town, there's a separate domestic violence agency, but they are closely tied with the police. So it's almost like, you know, in my own situation, when the police came a year and 9 months after my ex was out of the house, but it was a stalking issue, I minimized it thinking, well, you know, he's out. And they said, no, because we came for this issue, we need to connect you with domestic violence because they're the resource and they're the experts. And then they encouraged me. Actually, they did a lethal assessment screening, and I forgot how many questions. It was short, but if you answered yes to like 3, then you had to get on a call immediately with the officer there to the domestic violence agency. And then they strongly encourage you to go in and have counseling. So I feel like that seems to work well where we are. It's, you know, the police don't have their own DV person, but they have the connection to somebody who can handle all of that.
Yeah, absolutely. Come to think of it, there is, I remember on like domestic paperwork toward the bottom, it's like we leave a phone number for a domestic violence advocate that's not connected to the police department. So there is someone that does call those numbers back and you know, looks into whether that person needs a domestic violence assistance.
All right, so that's good. That's good. Okay, so then just lastly, you know, even though we got a slew of bad things said about the police in our feed, we did receive several comments about some really positive experiences that victims did have with police officers, and it was a complete difference. And so I thought when I was reading those, some in particular, it was apparent to me as a state certified domestic violence advocate who's been trained that these officers really seemed like they had been trained, highly trained in domestic violence. And I know sometimes police have a whole special victims unit of officers who are just, you know, just deal with domestic violence, almost like what you said with the judges. So you said that you did get some training, but who decides, well, first of all, who decides how you're trained? And then what kinds of training do you generally get?
Well, it's, I think the basic level training in the academy. Every state has its own police training commission. So it's like standardized training through, you know, across the board in every state. And they delve into the domestic violence and the correct paperwork and the policies and procedures for getting an outcome that's good for the victim. So there's that. But a lot of the work, a lot of the training that is updated is, you know, there's always updated policies on how to handle certain issues. But I mean, we have, you know, field training officers that actually give you that hands-on approach to domestic violence incidents. Those things are constantly being, I guess, reinforced to where, you know, it's just like a constant like update, like through, I don't know if this even makes sense, update through like the our, I guess, like a set of experiences. So it's see if I can sum it up because I feel like I'm not being very clear.
No, it's okay. In my head, I'm like, in a lot of areas, people have continuing education credits where they
Yes, yes,
kind of like something
yes.
like that.
And every year there is continuing education
Mhm.
for police officers. It's a part of our recertification process. So every year it's not the same thing. There's always something new, something different that that just kind of keeps us up to date with the year.
Yeah. Okay, so last question. What suggestions do you personally have that would help make police become allies to more victims so they don't feel as intimidated, et cetera, to deal with the police?
Okay. First, you're going through a lot of trauma. We understand that, but when we get to our when we get to the location, we're in a space where we want to, if the suspect is still on scene and it's an arrestable offense that with evidence that's being alleged, our number one priority is trying to get to that person first and then catch up with all the supporting evidence after. So, you've gone through trauma, and we want to give attention to that trauma, but at this point we want to, and I'm speaking for myself, I want to go ahead and close the case right there. I don't want it to be continued in the next hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, tomorrow, and next month. I want to be like, quickly, where's the evidence? Boom. Where's he at? Where's she at? Oh, over there. That's where I'm going. Well, let me take care of this situation right here, grab this person up real quick, and then we're going to come back and we're going to get all the supporting evidence together for the arrest documentation. But we have to get to the facts first. And I can understand where that could be difficult, to where you want to say what happened, but like literally when we get there, time is of the essence. And if we can go ahead and wrap this thing up quickly, and when I say wrap it up quickly, not so much the victim's situation, but the suspect situation, because if the suspect knows he did something, he's going to be out of there quickly. He's going to get out of there as fast as humanly possible. He wants to make it as difficult as possible to be found and jailed. That's self-preservation. So that's the number one priority at that point for him or her, is to get out of there. And if we can go ahead and wrap it up real quick, as soon as we get there on scene, that's the best possible situation for the victim. And I mean, it's not going to be great for the suspect, but we're in the business of protecting the victim.
So it's almost like victims have to change their perspective a little bit. Instead of thinking the police are here to take care of me and calm me down, it's more like, no, the police are coming to try to go after the abuser and get him or her, and then later. So it's almost like it's not your job. You can't do it all.
Right.
You have to.
But the pitfall in that is, the victim's going to be left feeling, victimized the second time. With like the hastiness and the quick action and the not taking time to talk to this person. But I mean, we want the caller to not take that part personal, because instead of I'll go back to wrapping it up real quick. It's just like this priority just to get the situation resolved, and it's done. And then, we can just, everybody's safe after that. And that's the priority. That's what really matters.
Yeah, I'm going to ask you just something that I thought of. Have you know what compassion fatigue is? Like somebody who deals with all these emergencies all the time, it's almost like they get where they're not as affected.
Uh,
What do you think
yes.
about that regarding the police or you or?
Oh, I'm definitely there. I've like, you spend 9 years as a police officer. Um, I I'm still connected to my compassion, but in a particular area where I'm in, it's extremely violent, and homicides happen every day. Shootings happen every day. Carjackings, armed robberies happen every day. If you don't have that barrier, you'll lose your mind.
Mhm.
If you're sensitive to every single incident, because these things are traumatic, if you're sensitive to every single incident, you can't do this job.
Mhm.
You will lose your mind.
Yeah, makes sense.
So the what's the word you said? The compassion
Compassion
fatigue.
fatigue. Yeah.
It's actually a protective measure
Mhm.
for people, EMS workers, doctors, nurses, police officers, fire um, fire department. They have they have to have that barrier.
Yeah.
It's a
Yeah.
protective barrier so you can handle situations. If I see someone got shot and I'm in this incident, everybody is crying and screaming as they should. I can't do that. My thought process is, okay, I need to rope off the scene. I need to call more officers here. I got to get these people out of the crime scene so they don't disturb the evidence so we can solve who did the shooting. Like, I can't be emotional here.
Mhm.
I
Mhm.
have to say, you do this, you do this, you do this, get this person out of here. They're destroying the crime scene. This car might be involved. This car might be involved. Uh, I need somebody to knock on the door because maybe somebody saw the crime occur. I need to talk to these people over here because maybe they're a witness of this particular situation. This My victim's going to the hospital, so now I got to get an officer to go to the hospital. These are all the things that are going on right now. It's like 8 different things, and depending on how large the crime scene is, it's going to be even more chaos. And this is the protective barrier. We can't sit there. We can't be like, go to a scene and we see somebody laying on the ground and it is a graphic scene and we can't stop and stare.
Mhm.
We have to get busy. Everybody else can stop and stare. They don't have the training we have. Time is of the essence. Just like in the domestic violence situation with the person there's with the suspect that may still be on scene. Time is of the essence. All right. Don't take it personal. We don't want to make it personal, but like, you don't understand the intricacies of the situation that we're in right now. And it's not meant for you to take it personal. We just need things done a certain way, and we need it done quickly.
So it's interesting because, we started this whole idea is that, you're a police officer with empathy, but I'm thinking even whether you have empathy or not, it affects how you do your job, but you're not going to be showing that empathy as much to a domestic violence survivor with comfort because you can't.
I, it's a switch, and you have to develop this early on as a police officer, especially in traumatic areas where a lot of violence occurs. You need to have that switch. I can vaguely remember a situation where I had to really exercise that switch because I had to talk to a kid, turn the switch off, talk to the suspect, turn the switch on, talk to someone who wasn't involved but wants to ask questions. I don't know if the switch is on or off at that point, but I'm just trying to like mediate my temperament, because
Mhm.
I can't go hard with the kid and I
Yeah.
can't go soft with the bad guy. And then what do I do with the person who's not even involved, is asking what's going on?
Mhm.
If I go too hard, then he thinks I'm disrespecting him. If I go too soft, then in my area, excuse my language, can I curse?
Yes.
If I go too soft, then it's criticism of how soft he is.
Yeah, I know what you're saying.
So it's just like, you know, it's a balancing act.
Yeah.
It's juggling all the time.
Yeah.
That's just the nature of the beast.
Yeah. Well, I'm not sure if there's anything else you want to say, but I am so thankful that you put yourself out here, because this is really tough, and it's not your individual responsibility to save the police from everything and to fix domestic violence on your own. But it's hard. But I'm glad that you offered your perspective as well. As someone who does have empathy and has seen so much of it, of this issue.
Right. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
thank you, Officer Jackson. Any last words, or are we done?
No. Well, actually, I do have a couple last words.
Okay. I knew you would.
If you have a complaint and you feel like you need to call 911, you were just assaulted, a crime was done to you, get in a car accident, don't wait till tomorrow, don't wait till next week, don't wait a month later, don't leave, go to another state, another city, another county, stop what you're doing, call 911. If you are not in physical danger, if you're actually in physical danger right this moment, or you feel like you need to go to the hospital, go to the hospital, then have the hospital call 911. But if you're not there, don't wait. Call 911 immediately.
Okay. So timing again, timing. And then documentation.
Documentation.
That's the theme. Timing and documentation.
Yes.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you again.
You're welcome.
Love your hot sauce.
Thank
you.
you.
Plug your hot sauce?
I'm sorry?
You want to plug your hot sauce?
Yes. Black market sauce, yay. Hot sauce, fresh ingredients, fresh peppers, made myself. It's good stuff. It'll burn your lips.
It will. Chris loves it. I'm not going near it.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks again. We'll talk to you soon.
All right. Bye.
Bye.